It started off like any other summer afternoon, sun blazing, sprinklers running, and my son just finishing up his lifeguard shift at our neighborhood pool. Since it was closing time, he followed the usual HOA rules and locked up the gate. Number? Drama, just routine. But then, like clockwork, the peace got shattered. Out of nowhere, the infamous HOA Karen sisters showed up. Heels clicking, voices raised, sunglasses on like they were heading into battle. They weren't just annoyed, they were furious. Apparently, they felt personally disrespected because the pool was locked and they couldn't get in. No reservation, no key, no reason. Just entitlement. They demanded he reopen the gate. My son politely explained the rules and told them the pool was closed for the day, just like the HOA guidelines clearly state. But that wasn't enough for them. Within minutes, one of them pulled out her phone and dialed 911, claiming a child was locking residents out of their own pool. Yes, she really said that with zero irony. The other sister started rattling the gate, yelling things like, "This is harassment," and "We pay dues," as if that somehow gave them the right to break in. By the time I got a call from my son, he sounded more confused than scared, but that changed quickly when 2 patrol cars rolled up. I dropped everything and rushed over, not sure what kind of situation I was walking into. Were they actually trying to frame him? Were the officers going to believe them? These sisters had a reputation for twisting stories, but this time, it was my kid in the middle of their circus, and just when I thought things couldn't get worse, one of the sisters started pointing at the security cameras like she had something to hide. Or maybe something to erase. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw the patrol car's lights still flashing, and the Karen sisters standing there with their arms crossed like they were proud of what they'd done. My son was off to the side, talking to one of the officers, clearly trying to explain everything. The gate to the pool was still locked, just like it should have been. The whole thing looked surreal, like a scene you'd never expect in your own quiet neighborhood. But this wasn't the first time these sisters had caused a stir. Everyone around here knew how they operated, always loud, always right, and always ready to make a scene when things didn't go their way. They'd clashed with neighbors before over lawn decorations, parking spots, even where someone's trash can was placed. But calling the police on a teenage boy for doing his job? That was a new low. I walked over, trying to stay calm, but inside, I was boiling. One of the officers turned to me and asked if I was the parent. I nodded and started explaining what really happened, that my son was assigned by the HOA to close the pool at a specific time, and he was just following policy. But while I spoke, I couldn't help but notice the sisters whispering behind me. One of them glanced at the security camera mounted on the fence, then nudged the other. That's when it clicked. Maybe this wasn't just about the pool. Maybe they were hiding something. Why else would they care so much about those cameras? Had something happened before they showed up? Something they didn't want caught on video. One officer stepped aside to check his radio, while the other kept asking questions like he was trying to poke holes in our story. And just like that, things felt like they were shifting not in our favor, as the officer continued questioning us. One of the Karen sisters suddenly changed her tone. She stepped forward, pretending to be all calm and reasonable, saying, "We just thought the boy was being disrespectful. That's all. We didn't mean to cause trouble." But it was too late for fake politeness. The damage was done. She'd already called 911, already accused my son of locking out residents, already stirred up a scene in front of half the neighborhood. And now she wanted to backpedal like none of it had happened. Meanwhile, I noticed a few neighbors had gathered at a distance, watching everything go down. One of them, Mr. Patel, quietly walked over to the other officer and said he had been nearby. When the whole thing started, according to him, the sisters had tried forcing open the gate before my son even had a chance to speak. He also said they looked nervous when they saw the camera above the pool shed blinking, still recording, still watching. That small detail made the whole thing feel more suspicious. Then another layer unfolded. The HOA president, Mrs. Glenn, showed up. She'd been alerted by a board member after someone texted her about the police being called. As soon as she saw who was involved, her expression tightened. She knew the sisters well too well. They'd caused drama at board meetings, argued over fines, and had even threatened legal action when told they couldn't host private events at the pool. And now here they were again, acting like victims. But what caught my attention most was when Mrs. Glenn quietly asked one of the officers if they had checked the footage from the pool cam yet. That's when one of the sisters blurted out, "Those cameras don't even work properly." Her voice cracked slightly, and both officers turned to look at her. Something was off, and everyone was starting to feel it. The air felt heavier now. You could sense the shift. The officers, who at first seemed to be leaning toward the sister's story, were starting to ask sharper questions. One of them asked directly why they didn't just use their key fob if they were supposed to have access to the pool. The taller sister hesitated, then muttered something about leaving it at home. But anyone who actually lived in the neighborhood knew the system had been updated just last month. No fob, no entry. It wasn't something you could forget or bypass. And if they didn't have a working key, then why were they really trying to get in? Mrs. Glenn walked over to the security panel near the gate and called the HOA's hide support from her phone. She wanted to verify if the camera had been recording that afternoon. While she spoke, the shorter sister began pacing. She looked up at the camera again, then down at her phone, nervously typing something. A few seconds later, she slipped behind the pool house. That move didn't go unnoticed. My son pointed it out to the officer, who then quietly radioed his partner to check around back. The moment dragged. Everyone was watching, neighbors, the HOA president, even the mail carrier who had just pulled up across the street and decided to stay in his truck. The tension felt like it was clinging to our skin. Then, as the officer circled around the pool house, we heard him call out sharply, "Ma'am, I need you to step back here right now." The sister reappeared, looking flushed and breathing fast. Something was definitely wrong. And then Mrs. Glenn, still on the phone, turned to us and said, "The camera's been recording all day. Every second, including when they showed up." That's when both sisters went silent. Not defensive, not loud, just silent. Like they knew the story they'd spun was about to unravel in front of everyone. The silence from the sisters wasn't just awkward, it was calculated. You could tell they were scrambling internally, trying to figure out their next move now. That the security footage was confirmed to be active. But before anyone could ask another question, one of the officers' radios crackled. The officer by the pool house responded quickly and then walked over, speaking quietly into his partner's ear. Whatever he said made the other officer's face harden. He turned to the rest of us and asked if anyone had noticed the padlock on the maintenance shed hanging open. I froze. That shed was never left unlocked. Stored cleaning supplies, equipment, and the electrical access to the pool security system. Mrs. Glenn's eyes narrowed, and she asked to check it herself. When the officer opened the door wider, it became obvious someone had tampered with the system. Wires were partially pulled, and the power switch looked like it had been flipped just recently. But here's the strange part. The system had a backup battery. So while the screen inside the shed had gone dark, the outdoor cameras had kept recording. That's when the second twist hit. Mrs. Glenn made a call to the HOA's private cloud storage vendor to check if any footage had been accessed. I deleted. A few minutes later, she got a reply that someone had attempted to remotely access the recordings earlier that day from a tablet registered under the HOA account. The problem? Only 2 people had access to those credentials. Mrs. Glenn herself and one former board member who had been removed 6 months ago. Guess who that was? The taller Karen sister's ex-husband. Suddenly, this wasn't just a neighborhood spat over pool access. It was bigger. There were layers to it: told grudges, broken access rules, and maybe even someone trying to cover up. More than just a gate being locked. And while everyone was still trying to process what that meant, the shorter sister whispered something under her breath to her sibling, glancing nervously at the officers. It didn't catch the full sentence, but I heard enough to know this was far from over. The moment the ex-husband's name came up, the tension shifted again. One of the officers asked the taller sister if she had any contact with him recently. She hesitated, then shook her head quickly, too quickly. But the younger sister didn't say anything. Her silence spoke louder than words. The officer stepped aside to make a quick call, likely to request tech support or confirm login activity, and in that short pause, Mrs. Glenn pulled me aside. She whispered that this might not be about the pool at all. Rumors had been swirling for months that some HOA funds had quietly gone missing before the board shakeup. No proof, just whispers. But now, things were clicking into place. While the officers were still on the call, one of them received an alert on his phone from the department's digital crimes unit. There it was, confirmation. An IP address linked to the HOA account login traced back to the Karen sister's house. And even worse, the system showed multiple deleted access logs from the previous week, meaning someone had tried to cover their digital trail. That shifted the story completely. This wasn't about pool access. It was about someone trying to erase something much bigger, and they nearly got away with it. The officers didn't waste time. They asked both sisters to step aside, and things moved fast after that. While they weren't arrested on the spot, they were both issued notices for tampering with HOA property and ordered to appear for questioning. A formal investigation into the deleted files and past financial records was opened immediately. My son, who had just done his job by locking a gate, was finally cleared, thanked, and told he had nothing to worry about. But just when we thought it was over, as the crowd began to disperse, Mrs. Glenn looked at her phone again and frowned. She turned to me and said quietly, "The security company just called. Another login attempt happened 5 minutes ago, from a different IP. Someone else, possibly someone higher up, was still watching, still covering their tracks." And just like that, we realized this story was far from finished. In the days that followed, the investigation picked up speed. The HOA brought in a third-party cybersecurity team to audit everything: financial records, login histories, even emails. What they found was shocking. It turned out that months before the Karen sisters' outburst at the pool, there had been quiet attempts to access and modify internal HOA documents. Most of the digital footprints pointed back to devices inside their home, but there were signs that at least one other person, possibly still on the board, had helped cover it up. That explained the last-minute login during the confrontation. Someone was trying to wipe things clean before everything surfaced. The sisters ended up being temporarily suspended from all HOA activities. They were fined for tampering with security property, and the board launched a full review of access privileges for all members. As for my son, he got an apology from the HOA and even a small award recognizing him for following protocol and staying calm under pressure. He didn't say much about it after, but I could tell he felt proud, not just because he was cleared, but because the truth came out. Neighbors who once stayed silent about the Karen sisters' behavior finally started to speak up. People came together, calling for more transparency in how the HOA was run. Mrs. Glenn pushed for new safeguards to protect digital records and limit admin access. In a strange way, the chaos at the pool that day sparked something good, forced the community to take a hard look at who was in charge and how things were managed. Looking back, it's wild how a locked pool gate exposed so much more. What? started as a petty confrontation turned into a wake-up call. And now, the neighborhood feels just a little bit safer and a lot more alert.